Hi, hello. I'm Margy Kinmonth. I'm a film director and an artist, and I have a film production company that makes feature documentaries about art, culture, biography, and my films go out all over the world. And my background is in art. I was trained as a fine artist, and I do watercolors and exhibit and so on. So I'm going to talk really tonight about one of my favourite films I made as a film director, which is called The Royal Paintbox, made with cooperation of the royal family. I'm going to be showing you some special clips, some from my archive, which have never been seen before. I'll be showing you behind the scene stills of production of the film, and there'll be plenty of time for questions at the end. So I'm looking forward to hearing your views. So bring up the questions. Okay, so this film is called Royal Paintbox, and it's about the artist within the royal family itself, past, present, and perhaps future. But the quest is to go back in time, as far back in history as possible, to find the earliest artist in the royal family. And we're going to be on quite a big journey here. The film itself is 90 minutes long, so obviously I can't show you that, but it can, you can see DVD of the whole thing if you like the story of it. And you're going to see spectacular landscapes and wonderful palaces, both inside and out, of Balmoral and Osborne House, Windsor Castle. You'll be seeing in the archives there, and everywhere that Prince Charles took me. So here's a little taster of the film.
Behind the well-known public face of the British monarchy lies a story previously untold on film.
Every now and then you inherit something special which gives an extra edge to the whole thing.
We're on a journey with the Prince of Wales to reveal the dozens of artists in the royal family tree who have left an extraordinary treasure trove of art spanning 5 fascinating centuries.
Looking through Queen Victoria's sketchbooks, some of them are really remarkable, I think. Others of her children were really very good, as you'll see.
They did actually pursue it to a point in which they wanted to be as good as a professional.
You think, how did I do that? Which part of me has it come from?
So that gives you an idea of what the whole film is like. It's I worked very closely with Prince Charles to make this film. He is a watercolour artist himself, and this fascinated me. He's very private about this painting, which he's been doing for years and years, and I thought it would be just great if I could persuade him to make a film about his practice. And as I kind of researched this a bit, I discovered, that there were really so many artists within the royal family itself, that wouldn't it be good to let us all together do this sweep back into history and find the very, very earliest work of art that we possibly could, and the earliest artifact that exists done by a member of the royal family. And it's a very long journey, this film. It took me several years to make. We discovered so many. In fact, there were too many to include in the film. They've all got great stories, and some of them are really quite obscure characters. So it's a little bit of telling of British history of the monarchy through their art. And if you're lucky enough to be an artist, you actually leave a legacy behind. So you create a picture, or you make a sculpture, or whatever, and it's there forever. So I'm the kind of filmmaker that focuses on images. I'm not a words person. I'm an image person, and so for me, this exploration's been great. And it took me into so many different archives. Not just Windsor Castle and not just the royal family, but I went into branches of the Mountbatten family, into archives like the Southampton archive, I found in, just the most extraordinary work sitting in boxes wrapped in tissue paper and very rarely seen. And so that's a little bit about the background, the way I make films. I'm very curious. I love to search around and find stories that have never been told before. And so this is a result of that. I took the story to Prince Charles, to his office, and it was a while ago. It was way before. There's been lots and lots of documentaries, I think, recently. So I feel that mine was one of the first, and for him, probably a really personal story for him. And he was a little bit reluctant to show his own art at first, but we gradually got there. So you'll see a little bit more of that as we go on. And I'd like to start by showing you a clip, which it's more than just what's in the movie. It's a little bit more, because some of it's from my personal archive, and it shows the family tree itself, which is a kind of device we use to whiz back and forth in time, and then Prince Charles in Windsor Castle describing one of his forebears, who was a prisoner actually, and then it takes you into this amazing drawing school which Prince Charles has created, which is teaching art students to draw and paint. It's very academic, beautiful, still lives, life drawing and so on, and also the after-school clubs which he's created. So you see a little bit of that in this clip, and then also something about the techniques behind the making of pictures. And this one's very rare and special. It's particularly what I'm interested in, because my own background as an artist, I've done painting and drawing, but also I've done printmaking and sculpture. I've done all sorts of things. So I find the process fascinating. Anyway, see what you think. Have a look at this.
Another royal artist to perfect their craft in prison, this time during the English Civil War, was the great-grandson of Mary Queen of Scots, Prince Rupert of the Rhine. He was known for the special engraving method he pioneered, called mezzotint.
When the Civil War started in this country, and his uncle, King Charles I, was obviously in trouble, he came back to help him. After the Restoration, 1660, he ended up as constable and governor of the castle, literally just across the way in the Round Tower. So everyone has happy ideas of him wandering about in here, I suspect. He was obviously incredibly skilled, I think. And you wonder whether he didn't do this as a result of what happened to his uncle, King Charles I. It's wonderful that these exist here and show, what talent he had. And you can imagine the scale of it. It was quite a job doing a mezzotint like that, as I suspect the students of my drawing school would probably attest to.
This is a mezzotint rocker. If you can see, there's like a very fine grooved surface. If you run your nail along it, you can hear that. And as you rock this over the copper plate, the tooth creates a tiny little mark in the surface, and that will then pick up ink when you print it.
He learnt it from somebody else on the continent, but then perfected it, improved it, and I think apparently invented various, additional tools to help you in the process. So he obviously spent a lot of time and effort developing this.
You can see here on the example that you've got these grooves where the rocker has obviously rocked, creating these dimples of lines. And then you would use a burnisher, which is basically like an eraser. It rubs out and polishes back the metal.
I always think it's really nice to see that art on film, because you can also relate to pictures and so on in relation to your own size, you know, rather than looking at things online or in an art gallery. You can't really tell how big things are. But I think that Metzgertin is really very, very large, and it's an amazing piece of work. And that's just one of the characters. And really, Prince Rupert didn't feature very much apart from that. So that's a nice story. The Victorians created an enormous amount of art. And so a lot of my film is, you know, takes place in the Victorian era. They were great memorialists. They kept things. They did watercolours a lot. They began to travel. And also the royal family itself became huge at that point. So this next clip I'm going to show you, it shows the kind of the rich pickings that we found at a place called Osborne House in the Isle of Wight, which was where Queen Victoria and Prince Albert lived. And Prince Albert, once he came from Germany, we all know that he created the Victorian Albert Museum and these massive museum complexes. And then he made his own palace on the Isle of Wight. And they had their 9 children there on long summer holidays. And instead of sitting and watching telly, the Queen Victoria and Prince Albert used to make scrapbooks in the evenings. So there's an awful lot of scrapbooks in this film, and I had a lot to go through. And it's an incredibly lovely record of these children's lives. And they actually made scrapbooks for their parents for their birthday and Christmas presents. A lot of present giving went on. So the next clip features one of my very top favourite contributors, Marina Warner, who's a wonderful feminist historian who I love. And I managed to persuade her to come to the Isle of Wight and give me her views of the royal family there at Osborne House. Look at this.
Well, this is the powerhouse, because the most extraordinary thing about this room are the 2 tables side by side. But this was set up early in their marriage for them to work side by side all day long, but also they pursued their hobbies here. This is where they made their scrap albums.
Prince Albert was a meticulous organiser and filer of anything, I mean, whether it's letters, documents, or drawings and sketches.
But that connects, you know, very closely to the idea that life should be lived is in a continual process of memorializing. So you should honor every moment, keep and preserve every moment.
So you have this wonderful archive of drawings, which is almost unknown. It's really exciting to find it.
So one of the things I do in my films is I don't really use presenters. I don't really like the idea of looking at art through the point of view of a presenter. But in this film, working with Prince Charles gave me a fantastic person to be the guide to all the royal art. And so quite a lot of the film is constructed in the kind of fairly intimate way. The conversations between me and him sort of off camera, and the whole film is constructed as a sort of journey, really. And a lot of the things that I showed him, I wanted to kind of get his response to things he hadn't seen before as well, to kind of give him the opportunity to have very fresh reactions to some of these scrapbooks and art generally. And I think for him, the experience was very nice. I knew about his own practice as a painter, as we all do. We know a little bit, but he was very shy about it. And throughout the 80s, he was painting more or less every day. He had wonderful teachers to help him. His own father, the Duke of Edinburgh, is an extremely great painter as well. And sadly, he's not in the film, but I've included some of his paintings, which are done all over the world. And then Prince Charles kind of picked up this royal gene. And what I saw, he kept producing then more and more paintings, and it really became a kind of document of all his travels all over the world, because whenever he travels around the world, and has done throughout his entire life as the Prince of Wales, he takes a royal artist with him on the tour. He believes in the eyewitness account of, rather than a photographer, somebody who will draw and paint. And he's the very best example of that. So I'll be talking a little bit more about that later on. But here's a little clip of him showing us, very modestly, I think, showing us some of his own paintings.
I was rather pleased with this one. I don't know why it worked, and the trees look right, and it just feels right.
Well, it's a lovely composition too, and we went and looked at it, and the sky was behaving.
But if you come another 10 days later, then it goes this colour. It's amazing. The heather, the grass.
It's hard to believe it really does do that.
I had another one I did in the summer of this, but this was a winter one. Again, it's a rather lovely old house, this out in the Goosey. It's called Queen Victoria, Prince Albert. Used to come to it. I think they planted the old Irish yews and things, and the original rhododendrons. Loch Nagar up here.
It's a lovely setting, yes. And I love the composition too.
Well, that's encouraging. It's finding the right spot. Well, this is a little Gelder cottage, or bothy, which again Queen Victoria and Prince Albert built. And then you see that this up here, the Glassfield, which there's a little island. You stood there. That was almost a bit I was sketching it. I was on the other side of the loch.
So I had quite a journey following him around on the film, and I went to, at the time he was very, very interested in doing these snowscapes at the very top of the Cairngorms, which is just the huge mountains behind Balmoral. And so I'd have to go up really high into the snow line with my cameras to kind of get the weather. And in all my films, I like to have a strong sense of place. And, you know, normally many different camera techniques I use to put the story together. But following up into the snow line was quite something for me. And it was actually too much to take a big camera. So I shot it all myself. I went up there and there's some blizzards blowing, but it's really a moonscape. It's fantastic. So I can see why he's inspired to paint up there. I think there's some of his best works. And just to tell you a little bit more about some of the other films I've made, I do like to work with actors a lot. I've filmed, I've made lots of films about art and biography and so on. And I find that actors give you a really good way into the story. They can sort of respond on a very emotional level, which is lovely. So I did this film with Eddie Redmayne, which was exploring all the artists in the First World War in the trenches. And that was a whole nother journey. So my life as a film director has really taken me all over the world. I mean, I've made many films in Russia, for example. In Australia, I made a film about the Aboriginal artists, and often in America and all over Europe. But I'm always looking for places to go which are going to be interesting and exciting, and then take my cameras and find stories so that people who can't get there can actually enjoy the process of traveling just by watching one of my movies. Anyway, the whole thing started really with, just to go back to the Royal Paintbox, it started with a visit I made to the Tate, and I'm going to show you a still of Queen Victoria's paintbox. And this actually, I filmed this in the Royal Academy archive, but I actually first saw her paintbox in an exhibition of watercolours at the Tate, and it was a different one. but I could see that she'd been doing a lot of painting, and I was very curious. That's really my whole way into the story. And I thought, gosh, all that time when she was bereaved after Prince Albert died, and she disappeared for decades, what she was doing was painting. And, there's a tremendously, useful and cathartic value in painting. And then once I'd gone to Windsor Castle, I found all these sketchbooks, absolutely wonderful little worn things and wrapped up in leather pouches. And they've got them all there in the archive. I mean, you're not allowed to touch them or anything. Very, very well preserved. But that was kind of my way into the story. And interestingly, it was also Prince Charles's way into the story, because he was equally inspired by Queen Victoria's watercolours. And I'll just show you another picture. This was the search that we had to go back to the earliest artists we could possibly find in the royal family. And I went back 500 years, and what I found was a tapestry. Mary, Queen of Scots, when she was in prison in Scotland, she was a very cultured queen, and she spent nearly all her time in captivity creating these amazing, coded works of art, which she sent to Elizabeth, kind of in her defence. And this is a replica, because this is a reconstruction I did of the sewing process, but this is one of her works, this cat. And when she was sent to the scaffold, she gave her tapestries to her ladies in waiting as a final present. And so they're not in the royal collection, they're scattered about in different collections. But I thought this was really interesting. This is about 500 years back, so that was the very earliest work that I could possibly find in the royal family. And you could dispute whether you think tapestry is art or not, and let's hear your views on that. But I thought that was kind of, her work was really sewn into her life story in a fascinating way. Then the next slide is, so we're back now. This is Balmoral, and just going to kind of run you through some production stills of the work I did putting the film together. So I spent a lot of time up there at Balmoral. I met loads of corgis, which was very exciting. Once we were doing some shots there, and it was time the corgis were coming in from their walk in the woods, and we all had to step aside, and they all had names, very soft and very lovely, and so I got to meet them. And this is within the estate. Prince Charles lives in Burke Hall, which is a little bit further away from the castle, and he has his own studio there, and this is where he does a lot of his work while he's on his holiday, like right now in August. I hope he's there, and I hope he's recovering from being unwell and doing his usual walks. But he has this beautiful table, beautiful equipment, and absolutely the best equipment you could have. And here he is doing a drawing for me for the film, or for us. And that's, I think he just had so many good teachers, and so kind of its tradition. Watercolour is difficult. We're doing views and distant weather and so on, so you need plenty of practice. Some people say it's the most difficult you can do. Anyway, that's that. So the next one is, here we are at, I'm interviewing him in Burke Hall, and he's got one of the Queen Victoria's scrapbooks here, which he's going through and talking about. And in fact, that is a set I made, which we had to carry around, because I had to create the same set wherever I was in the, because I just had like 15 minutes filming here, 20 minutes there. I just had to keep up with his schedule. It was absolutely unbelievable timetabling to get my sequences. And often I filmed with 2 or 3 cameras at once to get the best coverage. And so I sometimes had to reconstruct scrapbooks from archives where I wasn't allowed to take them off the premises or borrow them. And so, I gave him something to work with in a very short space of time. But scheduling, we all think, the filmmakers, we think we're really good at it, and we know how to get the best out of a day. But gosh, when I was working with Clarence House, absolutely unbelievable. It's obviously the military parades and so on, that's their thing, but the punctuality is terrifying. And here's Prince Charles showing me his paintings, which we had to hang them in a little corner. This is actually Highgrove, you wouldn't believe it, but we're working in a tiny little room, and his lovely butler had to hang all his paintings in a little, so we created a little studio there, and there's the ones he did in Africa and, Oman and lots of hot countries. But he loved this bit. You can see how happy he is. And there was one point where I could see we were getting overrun a little bit, and somebody tugging on my elbow saying, you've got to wrap this up because he's got to do a conference in a minute. And I said, look, I think we've got to stop now. And he said, well, actually, I'm really enjoying this. I'd love to, can I just have another few minutes? So it was so nice to be working with him. I was so excited about the whole thing. And here we are. This is at Highgrove, actually. He's looking at one of the albums of Prince Albert. It did when he was 8. So it's kind of drawings of a young boy drawing military battles and everything. And he hadn't seen this book before, so it's great fun to kind of explore them for the first time with him. Then we carry on. I'm just going to show you some more pictures here, and I'll talk you through them. This is a production still. I'm working with one of my cameramen called Jonathan Partridge, and we're filming here in Brixton at the after-school clubs. So I needed lots and lots of extras to kind of help the film move along and make it feel all present. And these kids all come in here after school at 4 o'clock, and they do art for a couple of hours. And the after school clubs, they happen all over the country, and it's absolutely tremendous to see what they get up to. So they're all working all over the floor, and they all come in, they're pretty rowdy after school, but within a few minutes they settle down and drawing, and everything goes quiet, and they're concentrating, and it's a lovely thing to watch. And also, I worked with some of these children as hands artists, because I needed to recreate some of the works done by, the royal family in Edwardian times and so on. So we used them as hands artists as well. And ditto in the next picture, we're filming with the skeleton at the Royal Drawing School in Shoreditch, which is the next picture. Here we are. So this is we're filming a life drawing class, and the students at the Royal Drawing School are fantastic, and they helped me by playing the roles of some of the Georgian, Victorian princesses, doing trompe l'oeil on the walls of Frogmore House, or they're doing, Princess Louise, the sculptor, Queen Victoria's daughter. I worked with a sculptor who actually did some reconstruction of a carving. She did a statue of her mother, which is in Kensington Gardens, and that's so works like that. I needed to have people to help me, and they, you can't just work with any old hands artists. They've got to be really good, and they've got to know what they're doing with the hammer and chisel. And so this was a real pleasure. Actually, I did some of the classes myself here, and the teachers are fantastic. I do hope they're going to be able to carry on, with social distancing. I hope they're going to have enough classes for people to go to in the autumn. I need to find out about that. Anyway, this is all fun to do. And here's the sequence you saw earlier about the mezzo tint. And again, this is in the etching press, these great big heavy presses, and you put the print under a blanket. And I found the process fascinating. I love that. I used to love doing that at art school. And so this is just another production still. And I'm actually in that picture. I was doubling up as the spark. I'm holding the light on the left-hand side, burning myself on this thing. But it's a wonderful thing making films. You know, you've been very, very inventive and get stuck in there. So the camera tells your story for you. And it's a wonderful thing about documentaries. You can do that. You can tell your story very visually. So this is an idea I had, and this is a motif that runs throughout the Royal Paintbox film. I kind of realised that painting watercolour is about painting the sky, which is basically made of clouds and water and so on. And I spend a lot of time when I'm doing my watercolours is mixing colour, and you know, you're constantly stirring your brush underwater. And I sort of felt it would be, you know, you want to get in close. I used to direct commercials as well, so I love this thing of sort of tabletop shoots and getting in there with the equipment and getting in really close. And so we shot a whole bunch of sequences with high-speed cameras, with 300 frames per second cameras in slow motion, with the paintbrush mixing the paint drops coming down, most wonderful effect in a tank. And you know, so every different colour has a kind of meaning in my film, and this is it's a kind of motif that takes you through. But it's another thing I do. I like to work from the point of view of the artist, and you know, so we can see that we can all do it too. Here we are doing that very thing I've just described. So we've got a tank here. Here's my cameraman, Rob Goldie, who I work with a lot. He's fabulous and, you know, terrifically inventive and loves a challenge like that. So you can see they've got the tank there, and very narrow depth of field, and dipping in the paintbrushes. And usually it's sort of, I usually use my own equipment. I have to take along my paint box to all these shoots, and, you know, you have to kind of create the props yourself. So I did some tests at one studio, and then we had a whole day in a tank. And actually, this is another place where I worked, because with documentaries, you never have enough money. And I was very, you know, delighted to be helped by Windsor Newton, who've got a great big whole floor of their premises, which has also got a museum. It's got all the old paint boxes and paintbrushes, and they let me work there. They have artists in residence there. So we worked in their premises for a bit. It's very nice, and I was very pleased with that. So here's another one. This was, you know, actually sort of in the water, looking up. And I mean, I'm doing a film at the moment where I'm recreating a plane crash, and because of the pandemic, it's very difficult to go out on location. I mean, the plane crash I'm dealing with happened in Iceland, but I'm going to have to work in a big studio and find a tank at somewhere like Pinewood, and to do the reconstruction of what happens in this film I'm making next. But you know, the important thing is to work it out, have a storyboard, and, you know, really try and be imaginative and have fun with it. So that's the paint box. And here I am with Jonathan Partridge. We've got quite a few cameras here, and we're filming up at Balmoral, on the, you know, this enormous kind of moorland with mountains and everything. And I did a lot of filming there with the Prince of Wales, you know, walking across the landscape and talking about what he's doing and so on. So this is all great fun. It was, yeah, very windy, and it's part of my job. Normally you get very cold and muddy and hungry and all those things, but this was lovely, and the sun came out. This is absolutely beautiful there. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to direct the Prince of Wales. I wasn't quite sure. Normally you say action and then everybody knows what they're doing. I was a bit nervous about sort of shouting action to him. It seemed a little bit rude, but actually that's really what he preferred. I mean, he'd been in the Navy, and I think to give very clear instructions to everybody, you just got to stick to what you know works. And this was there was a lot of long lens filming. But yeah, there we are on location, and we were very lucky it wasn't driving rain. It's very, very nice to be out there, and lovely conversations. So I suppose for me as a filmmaker, I got to see, you know, it's so great. You get the sort of every film you get you get a ringside seat into history by working with great people on great stories. And because I'm an independent producer and I've got my own company and I work kind of outside the system, in some ways it's right up to me to think up the ideas and develop them myself. And so really, I haven't told you about how I kind of got the access, but I was, you know, I got the idea and then I wrote to him and said, would you like to participate in this film about the artists in the royal family? And, you know, I was absolutely thrilled to, you know, he responded just immediately, so enthusiastically, and I was invited to tea at Clarence House. It was very exciting. And we discussed what we were going to do and our hopes and fears, and that was great. And then this shot here is by a lake, right on the Balmoral estate, and there's a spit of sand that goes out. And I said, well, what I really want to have in the middle of the film, I want to have a sort of quiet moment where we can just listen to the sound of the water, appreciate being in the landscape, and, you know, have something kind of completely still that happens. And so I said, well, if you go out there into that sort of area and do whatever you're going to do. And I had cameras hidden behind trees and things. And suddenly he took out his drawing things and started doing a picture. And it turns out that what he does is he takes his writing paper in his pocket and red biros, and he does sketches while he's on his walks. And then he takes those sketches back. He makes notes about colour and shape and what he's trying to do. And so this is the start of one of those. And here he is by the lake. He's very keen to keep the countryside really nice. So it's open to the public. Anybody can walk there. But he did spend quite a lot of time picking up sweet papers, which were, you know, tiny sweet papers. So by the end of the filming day, we'd done quite a lot of clearing up as well, which was an added bonus. But, you know, practice what you preach. And here, this is also on the Balmoral estate, these wonderful birch trees, lovely light. And I mean, I'm making this sound easy because actually there's months and months of preparation that go into these shoots. So I'm not going to show you a picture of me slaving away at my desk doing emails, but there's a hell of a lot of work that goes into putting the films together. And then the joy of being there. And here I am with another cameraman, the late Scott Ward, who actually sadly died. He was a wonderful cinematographer, Scottish, and his work is absolutely spectacular. And, you know, you could see what we're doing here is we're doing some lovely shots by the lake. And this is quite near where the Queen has her picnics on when they're on holiday up there. They go driving off in Land Rovers and they find these special places. They have family picnics and barbecues. And this Mirror Lake is just beautiful. So there we are. And that's right up in the Cairngorms. That's my photo of being at the very top. And you can, you know, it is like a moonscape, isn't it? It's really incredible landscape. So this inspired him, and I think it, you know, I like my films to inspire people. You know, if you're the slightest bit inclined to do any painting, just get on and do it. That's the message. Then we're going to look at, this is another wonderful artist in the royal family, Sarah Armstrong Jones, who's a contemporary artist who is the daughter of Princess Margaret. And she's featured in the film. We have a sequence of her in her studio. She's a wonderful painter of, well, all sorts of semi-abstract, you know, wonderful colorist, and again, fantastically modest. But she is a professional artist, and she very sweetly allowed me to film in her studio, and so you could see the kind of all the stuff that's on the walls, stuff that goes on. And they're a very artistic family. Both her sons are artists. Well, I know one of them in particular very much. And so the artistic tradition is carrying on. So I was thrilled to persuade her to take part. And yeah, here she is. She's doing a lot of work with flowers and vegetation and gravity also, because her work drips down with the gravity. And then she also introduced, in the film, the work of her mother, Princess Margaret, who designed ceramics. And so we've got so many things in this film. We've got her this teapot set that Princess Margaret had designed and made. And so we filmed that, and you'll see that in the film. It's lovely. And Princess Margaret also made paintings out of feathers, all different pheasant feathers, and made flowers and so on out of that. So clearly it's a sort of hobby, but it's really nice that everybody's doing all this stuff, as well as being allowed to visit the Windsor Castle archive, which Princess Margaret took her family there when they were little, and so they kind of grew up in amongst the fabulous collection of Leonardo's and, just all that amazing royal collection. Hopefully Windsor Castle is open again. I'm not quite sure, but it's so worth a visit. And if you're out of England, it's still worth coming, because the royal collection, thanks to Charles I and Charles II and so on, it's a very rich collection of Italian art and Van Dyck's and portraits, and it's well worth a visit to Windsor Castle. So we're rattling on a bit, really. We've got some more. That is Queen Victoria, which you can get a sense of that. There's a lot of those big portraits at Osborne House, and they've been copied as well. And then there's Prince Albert also on the next one. No, maybe not. It'll come later. Anyway, so these are Queen Victoria's own watercolours, and I just picked out a selection of them because I think they're great. She sort of started off a little bit pedantic, but she was taught by Edward Lear and Leach, and so Queen Victoria herself had her tutors, but this is the sort of work which she's doing later on, and I think they're lovely. The colour is lovely, and they're quite small. These are kind of pocket-sized things, so she didn't work very large. And these were done out of the window of Balmoral Castle. There's a lot of them, and she's doing moonscapes and so on. So we visited some of these landscapes ourselves. And here's another. Yeah, that's the moonscape out of the window of Balmoral. And I think that's probably the view that the Queen sees at night from her bedroom window too, because when we were filming there, the Queen was there on the premises, and that's where her sort of apartment is. And here's the River Dee, which is going through the estate, and that's also lovely to paint rivers. Great fun. Very nice to sit there and do it. And then this is Queen Victoria's painting of Osborne House in the Isle of Wight. So this is kind of from the beach, looking back up at it. I mean, it may not be everybody's favourite architecture, but it's still, I think it's interesting. It's all interesting. Now, this is a really special find. Prince Charles was very keen that I should follow up the artists on the Mountbatten side of the family. That's his father's branch, and he had a great forebear called Prince Louis of Battenberg, who was a really fantastic artist, and he went on the trip to India with the Prince of Wales. This would be about over 100 years ago, and he was doing kind of sketches and so on the trip, and they had an artist there, but the artist became ill and had to be put ashore, and Prince Louis of Battenberg actually became the royal artist himself, and his work is here published in the Illustrated London News. And this, wherever they went, and this still happens, and you'll see some very funny stories in the film, the presents that they're given when they travel are amazing. I mean, Prince Charles was given a special yak when he was in the Himalayas. He's given this shampooed yak as a special present. I don't know if he managed to bring it back, but here's a present that happened over 100 years ago, and it's an ostrich, and they're trying to get it on board the ship. And so you can see it's got a great sense of humour, and there is in the Illustrated London News. So I like that story very, very much indeed. And then this is by Prince Alexander of Hesse, and it's the rooster. That's the forebear, going back a bit. So I worked with another archive here. The Mountbatten family have got a lot of their work in Romsey and in archives, but a lot of it's stored in Southampton. So I worked with Southampton University, and they helped me to find these sketchbooks, which I kind of put them all together and put them in front of Prince Charles. So they're all part of the story. I quite like the rooster. And I think, I'm not sure if that's almost the end of the stills, because I want to make some time for questions in a minute. But I just thought I'd show you the poster, because, you know, when you're a filmmaker, you have to do everything yourself. You have to have the idea yourself, and you have to more or less do all your marketing yourself first. I mean, I know it's very obvious, but we're all trying desperately to get films and audiences and people back into cinemas again. And it's amazing how the old-fashioned poster is still the way in which the audiences really learn about movies that are coming up. And you know, when we used to go on the tube in London, you know, you'd look at posters, and I love looking at posters. So this is my poster, and I designed it, and so it's got the paintbrush, and then below it's got this idea of the paint box with all the little squares in it, and so I had fun doing this with the colours and some of the different works of art. You can see the statue, Queen Victoria's statue. You can see the paintings of Windsor Castle, and some of the very beautiful flower drawings. So I was pleased with this poster. And then also here, I've got a lot of people to thank who helped me with the film. You know, it was ITV who kind of greenlit one part of the making of it, and then Andrei Konchalovsky was a co-producer in Russia, and the film went down brilliantly in Russia. They liked it very much. It was shown at the Moscow Film Festival. Did very well, I was pleased to say. And then it's gone out on PBS, where the audiences who like Downton Abbey and so on, it's popular there. But it's kind of a film that lasts forever, really. Doesn't go out of date. And it's a little bit like a travelling exhibition, you know, because I brought it all together. Here is the veritable DVD, which if you want to see the whole film and the extras, you can get it either at Foxtrot Films, which is my production company, from the store, or if you're in America, the address is there. You can buy it directly from PBS to get the NTSC standard. So hope you'll, if you're interested, you can obviously see the whole film. It does get screened from time to time. I have screenings, but right now it's kind of a nice thing. It's an entertaining story. Now, I think it would be great to listen to some questions. You know, if anybody's got any questions, I've done rather a lot of talking. Anybody got anything they want to ask?
Margy, yes, we've had some great questions in. So the first question comes in from John, who's in London, and he said, what was it like meeting Prince Charles? Did you feel a lot of pressure?
Well, that's a great question, because, yes, I mean, I felt a lot of pressure. Weirdly, I'd created this pressure for myself, because, you know, to work with him. But the invitation to go to Clarence House was quite, it was a big deal going there for tea. And I was like 2 hours early or something. I was so desperately not wanting to be late. And I sat and waited, and it was full of clocks tinging the time, and you could hear distant voices. So I was concerned about meeting him, that we were going to hit it off, and also I just felt, gosh, it's so little time. But as soon as I met him, he immediately put me at my ease, and we had a really nice conversation. The butlers brought the tea and just poured it out, so we didn't waste time talking about milk and sugar or anything. And I soon discovered about his passion for art, and I could see, it was going to be absolutely fantastic ride. So, it's his job to put people at their ease, but also it was my job as a film director. It was I didn't really want it to be too formal. I wanted him to feel personally involved. So, I wanted to kind of have a sort of intimacy with him that you wouldn't normally find if he's giving a speech or something. So my job as a director was to kind of create the right atmosphere so that he could feel free and comfortable about what we were talking about. But I worked very closely with him.
Thank you. We've had a couple of questions, people asking the same question really. So that is, do the royal family ever sell any of their paintings? And does Prince Charles ever donate his paintings to charity for auction?
Well, that is a very good question. The works of art I'll start with the first bit. In the royal collection, the Queen has one of the biggest art collections in the world. I mean, it is phenomenal. And you can also see it at Buckingham Palace. They have these great exhibitions. She's very generous about lending. I don't think she ever sells any. She gave me her permission to use works from her collection in the film. And actually, there is one work of art by her in the film, which is a lino cut that she did as a child of a circus pony, and that's in the archive, so you can't see that, but that's in the movie. And then Prince Charles himself is, he's the head of many charitable institutions, and so his works of art do become part of this sort of raising money for charity. And I don't think they're ever auctioned on an open market, but they're very carefully curated. I would love to have been able to sort of own one, but not really my call. But I think he uses them in a really effective and generous way for charity.
Tom from Boston, he says, was art education an important part of royal education historically?
Oh, hi, Tom. Well, that really is a very interesting question, because I had to overcome my scepticism a little bit at the beginning, because I thought all these royal family, they just seem to have so much leisure. And I sort of thought, well, gosh, are they going to actually have anything to say? And what do they do with their leisure time? And then I discovered that actually some of the artists that we feature that were so well taught, and they really did work at their art. And so they were really good. I mean, they were as good as many professional artists. They had a talent, but it was definitely part of their education. And particularly the ones who weren't directly in line to the throne, who were the sort of, you might say, the also-rans, who may or may not have had a future as a head of state, but they were just really well trained. Yeah.
Roberta from Oregon, she would like to know, how did Prince Charles learn to paint?
Oh, hi, Roberta. Well, he was taught to paint early on, a little bit, as part of his education, but then he went into the Navy, and that wasn't really part of it. But he did learn naval drawings, and logbooks and so on, which had to be very high standard. So that was part of the training that he had, I suppose. I guess he was 17 or 18 or something. So you had to be able to do these landscapes and so on, of anchorages and things like that. Then this scheme that he does of travelling with an artist on every trip, he's worked with people like Susanna Fiennes. He's taken amazing artists with him on the trips, and they all help him. So if there's time, there's going to be a chat. There's going to be a few tips about how to mix a great grey. There's going to be, so he's learning all the time. And he's looking at art a lot. That's the best thing you can possibly do is look at art, because you're constantly learning. And I think I'm not quite sure how much time he has right now for painting, but you have to paint and draw every single day to keep good at it, just like keeping fit. So I suppose it's an ongoing thing. I've no idea how he's going to fit in his painting when he becomes king.
Jerry from Ohio, he said, though I had studied art from high school onwards, I had not heard of mezzotint prints. Are they still done today?
Oh, hi, Jerry. Well, I never heard of mezzotint either. It's very, very unusual, but there you are. We learn. I mean, I think people do it. It's the kind of type of etching that you just make these little lines and the ink goes in. And but to do it on such a big scale, I think was really quite unusual. But also he did a lot of copying. So he'd copied Rembrandt's and Titian's and so on as well. But maybe look it up and see, it's something you could do yourself. You just have to work on a copper plate and you put on a ground and then you cut into it, put it in the acid, and it's a bit like an etching.
Susie from Portland, she says, thank you for such an interesting presentation. Do you think with technology today, creation of real art will suffer both within royal circles and amongst us normal people as well?
Oh, Susie, that's such a interesting question. I mean, I think a lot of people like David Hockney and so on work with, iPad painting. So, the technology is there to do all sorts of things on your laptop, but there's nothing like actually, getting in there and, for me, working with the paint itself. But I think it's going forwards and backwards. It also depends on how you want to exhibit, because whenever I go to the Venice Biennale, I see all sorts of, this very traditional art is exhibited and shown alongside the most innovative stuff, which is all electronic and brilliant. So it's how you use the technology. And I think we're going to have to be very clever going forward with, it's more and more difficult to sort of see art physically. Well, certainly now with the pandemic, it's very difficult to get into art galleries and spend enough time looking at it. So I think the more inventive people can be with laptops and electronic presentation, the better.
Thank you. Linda from Virginia, she says, I know that Victoria did drawings, but did she do any watercolours or any other art form also?
Linda, she did, yeah. I mean, it's mainly watercolour. I think she did a little bit of oil, but it was mainly watercolour because she wanted to combine her walks and being out of doors. And kind of that's pretty much what they did in Victorian times. Watercolour was the main thing. But you can correct me if you think I'm wrong. That's just what I found in the archive anyway.
Sophie from Cambridge, I think you've already touched on this, but what will your next film be? Thank you for a peek into the Royal Paintbox. Very interesting.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Well, actually, it's interesting you should say that you're from Cambridge, because my next film I'm doing is about an artist called Eric Ravilius, and I've been working on his story. He was a war artist in the Second World War, and he was very young and very brilliant, and sadly he was killed in a plane crash off Iceland, and that was in 1942. So I'm working with the Imperial War Museum to make a film about his life. He's a great British artist that's really not a household name. And so I'm going to be going to Cambridge very soon for the Battle of Britain air show, which is happening in the middle of September. And so I've got an awful lot of planes I've got to film from that period, where they're going to be flying them. And so I'm working with pilots and so on, quite near you in Cambridge. And this film is taking me an inordinately long time to make. I don't know why. It's just so difficult to get the money and all this sort of thing. But I've done a lot of filming already, and I'm determined to bring it to people's screens because he's a great, great artist. And so my campaign is to allow everybody to see his work and understand and know him, because he died for his country, really. And there's this great legacy. It's a lot of his work is in tissue paper in archives. So that's one of the films I get to make next. I've got quite a few, actually.
Alan from Myrtle Beach, he says, any of the other current royals we know are artists?
Well, that's a good question. We know that I think Kate does some art. I mean, I didn't, her children, her family, obviously, they're all doing art at school. I don't know if there's any other professional artists currently, but I mean, David Linley makes furniture. He's Princess Margaret's other, he's a son, and I don't know about William and Harry, but, I'd love to know. I mean, I'd like to make another film about art, because I kind of felt, with them, I just felt that there was a point where I had to stop. And it really was Prince Charles's story. I mean, the other film I really want to make is a film all about the tour artists themselves, all the people that went on the trips with him. This film's called Travels with the Prince, and I want to work with, there's about 20 or 30 of them, and that would give you an incredible insight into the sort of the Commonwealth, as it were, all the places that Prince Charles went. And those are all contemporary artists, and they're all busy working artists today, and they're all fantastic. So if I can get that funded, that's right on my list.
Thank you. Mark from Yarmouth, he said, did the royal family do any art during World War II that showed the scenes at the time?
I don't think they did, but I mean, we do know that the Queen Mother was very, very fond of the work of John Piper, who did all the amazing works on the Coventry bombing, and so she collected his work. But I don't really know if they actually did do any drawings during the war themselves. Again, I'd love to know, so let me know. By the way, if anybody wants to get in touch, just go to my website, Foxtrot Films, and you can leave me a message. And I'd love any feedback. It's really nice for me. So, and these questions I don't know the answer to, you can let me know.
We've had some lovely comments come in. One from Joanna saying, thank you very much for your preview of the film. I like to see the paintbrush and the water shots to tie everything together. Jan from Salt Lake City, she said, thank you for this lovely presentation. I'm going to look for your film at PBS. So that's nice. Last question of the evening then, Margy. This comes in from Barbara from Lady Lake. Can you just remind us, where can we watch Royal Paintbox online? And thank you for the most interesting programme.
Well, thank you very much. That was so kind of you. Unfortunately, you can't watch it online. I'm not allowed to show it online, and that's partly because any profit goes back into the Prince of Wales charity. So it's absolutely not allowed to be shown online. And unfortunately, that means it can only be seen on the DVD. But come to my website at Foxtrot Films if you have any trouble whatsoever about, and you can look at my other titles there, and you can see the other sorts of films I do as well. But it's very difficult distributing films. Oh yeah, well here's where you can get the film. So directly at Foxtrot Films, or if you're in America, from that shop website at PBS, because they would have the NTSC version. It's got bonus extras and so on. Anyway, I mean, just before I finish, I'd really always want to thank everybody who works with me, because I'm absolutely just one person in the cast and crew of many, and I have a fantastic producer, Maureen Murray, who's my business partner, and we do a lot of our films together, and all these partnerships and the crews and the contributions and everybody who works with me. I just want to thank them very, very much, you know, and let's all do it again.
Behind the well-known public face of the British monarchy lies a story previously untold on film.
Every now and then you inherit something special which gives an extra edge to the whole thing.
We're on a journey with the Prince of Wales to reveal the dozens of artists in the royal family tree who have left an extraordinary treasure trove of art spanning 5 fascinating centuries.
Looking through Queen Victoria's sketchbooks, I mean, some of them are really remarkable, I think. Others of her children were really very good, as you'll see.
They did actually pursue it to a point in which they wanted to be as good as a professional.
You think, how did I do that? Which part of me has it come from?